Okay, everybody, I think we'll make a start. If that's okay, we make the time 7 o'clock. We're just commenting on the clock up there, which is keeping its own time, but we don't think it's right. We've got to get somebody with a ladder in order to change the time. Welcome to the first Cabinet meeting of the new Council. Very pleasant evening. I'd like to say thank you to the Deputy Leader for giving up her evening on her birthday to come to Cabinet. She knows how to celebrate in style, obviously. Possibly the largest team of officers I've ever seen at a Cabinet meeting. I don't know about you. Could be. And obviously welcome to all members who've come along as well. Fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the officers via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Please switch off or turn to silent your mobile phones and do not make or receive calls while the meeting is in progress. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will subsequently be broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? Not seeing anybody. The following members have asked already to speak under Council Procedure 20.1. Item 5, Councillor Donaldson. Item 7, Councillor Jill Bayford. Item 8, Councillor Jill Bayford. Item 9, Councillor Rogers. And item 13, Councillor Bayford. Is there any other members who would like to speak under 20.1? Councillor Pugh.
Agenda item 10,
Others? Councillor Austin?
6, 9 and 10, please.
6, 9
Chair.
and 10. Is that it? Thank you. So we've got a nice long agenda this evening, partly as a result of the fact obviously there can't be any Cabinet meetings over the election period. Without any further ado, there can be no apologies because Cabinet is all here. Does anyone have an interest to declare in the items of business on the agenda this evening? No declarations of interest, so we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting on the 16th of March 2023, a copy of which is attached to the agenda. I propose to take the minutes as read. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Yates. Members agree? Thank you. Then we've got the extraordinary meeting which took place on the 21st of March. Again, the copy is attached to the agenda pack. I propose we take the minutes as read. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Yates, thank you. Members agree? Thank you. So we move on to the first substantive item, which is the Westgate-on-Sea Draft Neighbourhood Plan, which is for me to introduce. So the recommendation here is that the Council issues a decision statement that it accepts the recommendation in the Examiner's report and the draft neighbourhood plan can proceed to referendum. Under the Localism Act 2011, neighbourhood plans can be prepared by local communities and are led by town or parish councils or a neighbourhood forum in areas which do not have a town or parish council. If Thanet Council adopts a neighbourhood plan, it would have the same significance as other development plan documents, for example the local plan for the district. Westgate-on-Sea Town Council has produced a draft neighbourhood plan. It was published and formally submitted to the Council and has subsequently been assessed by an independent examiner. The examiner's report has also been published. It supports the proposed neighbourhood plan with some minor modifications and recommends that it be subject to a referendum. The Council now has to issue a decision statement as to whether or not it accepts the recommendations in the examiner's report, and if not, what actions will be necessary. The Council also has to consider whether the draft plan meets the basic conditions for a neighbourhood plan. The report before Cabinet sets out relevant issues in the examiner's report for Cabinet's decision, which will also form the basis of the decision statement. The draft neighbourhood plan is generally supported. It's been positively prepared and includes policies that generally conform with the adopted local plan. It's encouraging to see that the Town Council has included policies which, although too detailed or too specific for the local plan, do generally support the delivery of the local plan and have a good evidence base. For example, the neighbourhood plan identifies important seafront characteristics and designated seafront character zones to protect those characteristics. I therefore propose the recommendations as set out in the report. That is, that the Westgate-on-Sea neighbourhood plan be modified with the modifications set out in the examiner's report at Annex 1, and that the Council issue a decision statement that the plan should proceed to referendum. Is there a seconder, please? Seconded by Councillor Alban, thank you. And I have Councillor David Donaldson to speak. If he's here.
Hi, good evening. I'm David Donaldson. I'm Westgate Ward Councillor for TDC and also the Chair of Westgate Town Council. Westgate Town Council was formed in 2015, and shortly after its formation it set up a working group to produce the neighbourhood plan. The working group went through a long process of consultation and engagement with the residents. This was in fact interrupted by COVID, as was everything else, and now we finally reached the final stage, which is where it's been put to the examiners. The examiners seem to be happy with the plan, so we've maybe passed our examination, but this has been a gigantic task. And I'm not sure which exam we passed, but I think somebody who goes through this process, kind of deserves a PhD or something. Jill Gray, who has been leading on this, our town councillor, our town clerk, has done an absolutely fantastic and splendid job. And also Danielle Dunn, who's from Goldstone Town Planning and supported this. So I would like to ask the Cabinet to support this motion this evening, and that we can then progress to a referendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Does any members like to comment on the Westgate Town Plan Neighbourhood Plan? Okay, so Cabinet's asked that the Neighbourhood Plan be modified as set out in the report, and that Council issues a decision statement that it accepts the recommendations in the examiner's report and the draft Neighbourhood Plan can proceed to referendum. Do members agree? Agree, thank you. We move on to item 6, which is the amendment to the air quality management zone, and it's Councillor Keane. Welcome to Cabinet, Councillor Keane.
Thank you. Okay, so Thanet District Council is committed to improving the environment for all our residents and reducing health inequalities often associated with air pollution. Air quality has improved across Thanet in the last 5 years. There have been no exceedances of national air quality objectives across the district during this period. Government guidance and DEFRA appraisal of the local authorities' annual air quality status reports recommend that TDC considers revocation of the air quality management area, advising that no AQMA should remain where there have been 5 years of compliance with the air quality objectives. A detailed assessment of 2 former pollution hotspots was undertaken using traffic data and dispersion modelling to predict levels across the entire area. The report indicates a risk of exceeding guideline levels at a number of properties between High Street St Lawrence and Shah Place, Ramsgate. The local authority has increased monitoring within this area to determine whether real-world measurements do reflect the modelled exceedances. The declaration of the smaller, more defined AQMA will give appropriate weight and focus for improvement measures within the subsequent action plan. I therefore ask that Cabinet approve the report recommendations to revoke the existing urban AQMA order and approve the declaration to the smaller St Lawrence one and authorise the application of the common seal to the order.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Seconded.
Thank you, Chair. I simply wanted to ask a question. I welcome the focus on this area, which is primarily in my ward, because it is an area where there is a great deal of traffic and a lot of potential pollution. I'm just wondering what flexibility we have to look at other areas if, as development continues in some of our rural areas, etc. Are there other areas we can focus on, or is this it now for the next 5 years? I don't quite understand the process. I wonder if you could explain, or if the officer could explain.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. I think it's in a number of our wards, actually, because I think that this area is around a junction of about 4 different wards in Ramsgate. Yeah. Okay, please.
We monitor pollution levels across the district, and it's this small area that is showing potential of coming close to exceeding the objectives. The modelling has said it's at risk, and so we've deployed a lot more monitoring diffusion tubes in that area, so we can see if it actually does represent real world conditions. But we do monitor across Thanet, and if there's any if you're concerned about a particular area, we can always look to put monitoring in that around those areas just to check those levels. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I have to say from basic observation, I'm not surprised that that's a place where we would want to do air quality monitoring, because it does seem to me there's a bit of a traffic issue there and queuing traffic around the junctions. Right, so that's been moved and seconded. Members have any further comment on that? Not seeing any. Okay. So are members happy to agree to approve the revocation of the urban AQMA order and approve the declaration of a smaller defined St Lawrence AQMA and authorise the application of the common seal to the order? Members agree? Agree. Thank you. And we can move on to item 7, which is the Building Safety Act 2022. And Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you very much, Leader. This evening, Cabinet is asked to, firstly, approve the recommendation to name Thanet District Council as the accountable person as described in the Building Safety Act 2022. Secondly, approve the recommendation to name the Director of Place as the principal accountable person, again as described in the Building Safety Act 2022. Thirdly, approve the adoption of the revised fire risk assessment policy. And finally, delegate authority to the Director of Place to approve future minor amendments required to the fire risk assessment policy. The safety and security of our residents is paramount, and external legislation that supports this and strengthens our ability to protect residents is welcomed. Today we are discussing the Building Safety Act, brought in 2022. This is new legislation designed to enhance the safety of high-rise residential buildings, something that is of enormous importance and significance, both in relation to the timing of this report, coming as it does one day after the anniversary of the terrible events at Grenfell, and in relation to the greater protections that we can bring to our high-rise stock. The Building Safety Act introduces new duties relating to fire and building safety and covers all high-rise buildings. It is important to note that this legislation applies to all high-rise buildings, not just those in social housing stock, and tenants in privately owned high-rises can and should seek assurances from their landlord or leaseholder that this legislation is being followed, and can contact our private sector housing team if they have concerns. What we are looking at today in terms of Cabinet decision is how we are enacting the support and protections required, and how it applies specifically to us as a social landlord. The plans set out here today relate to the Council's tenant and leasehold service and the Council's management of its social housing stock. We own 6 high-rise residential buildings over 18 metres that fall into the scope of this new legislation. The Act introduces the requirement for each of these buildings to have their own building safety case. The building safety case should demonstrate the following: the measures being taken to keep the building safe, how the measures in place prevent and limit the consequences of a major incident in the building, identify potentially harmful events that show the measures in place will stop or reduce the impact of a major incident, i.e. fire spread or structural failure, and the approach to ongoing management of the building that ensures those measures remain effective. The purpose of a building safety case is to collate and record all information about how the risk of fire spread and the structural safety of a building is managed. This is something that we already do for each of our high-rises, but the Act requires a particular format, and this information now has to be submitted annually to a new regulator for building safety, which provides further external structure to the internal processes that we have been following for some time to guarantee resident safety. The new regulator for building safety is the Health and Safety Executive. They will receive our annual reports to ensure that guidance is being followed. The Act introduces 2 new roles and responsibilities for landlords or building owners. The 2 new roles that are created are those of the accountable person and principal accountable person. This report makes a recommendation on who these should be within the existing structure, recommending that the Council itself be registered as the accountable person, with our Director of Place, Mr. Bob Porter, being the principal accountable person. Some changes are required within the team to accommodate the new requirements. These changes are recorded within the report, but principal changes are as follows. A new post of Building Safety and Compliance Manager has been introduced. This allows the focus required to ensure we are fully complying with the new requirements. The Council's fire risk assessment policy has been reviewed in line with the Building Safety Act and changes to the Regulatory Reform Order 2005 in relation to fire safety. We will also be making enhancements to our current compliance database to hold all new information required by the Act. The Act also strengthens existing fire safety orders, including for buildings over 11 metres in height. There are 17 of these within our housing stock. Reflecting our priorities established when we brought housing back in-house, the Act requires a significant level of focus on resident involvement and engagement to ensure that residents feel safe, secure and heard. Thanks to our ongoing focus on resident involvement, our Resident Involvement Strategy 2022 to 2025 addresses the requirements of the Building Safety Act 2022, but further engagement and strengthening of that involvement is desirable. We will be creating a new high-rise tenant and leaseholder group to ensure that the voices of those living within our high-rise buildings are heard, and will continue to consult regularly with our existing tenant and leaseholder group so that opportunities to feed into these processes are visible, flexible, and promote equality of access. The measures Cabinet are bringing forward today are of utmost importance, and I have every faith in housing to deliver what is required to support our tenants. I move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Yates. Thank you. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for the report. I welcome this report as ensuring the safety of our residents is vital. I support the proposal to appoint TDC as the accountable person and Director of Place as the principal accountable person. The contribution of our tenants and leaseholders through the Tenants and Leaseholders Service has proved to be invaluable in highlighting issues of concern. I'm keen that this consultation continues with the new Building Safety Act, and I'm pleased to hear that you have this in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Obviously, this is a very important subject. It's quite a dry document and action that's requested of the Council, but it is of absolute importance in terms of the safety of our residents. Members have anything to say further on this? No? Okay. Members, I'll read the recommendations again. Approve the recommendation to name Thanet District Council as the accountable person as described in the Building Safety Act 2022. Approve the recommendation to name the Director of Place as the principal accountable person as described in the Building Safety Act 2022. Approve the adoption of the revised fire risk assessment policy and delegate authority of the Director of Place to, it says on my script, leaves it hanging.
Make minor amendments.
To make minor amendments, yeah. Great start, yeah. Do members agree? Okay, thank you. And before we move on completely to item 8, when we move on to item 8, I have spotted a typo in item 8, which I'm going to point out before that becomes another trap. One of the recommendations says to recommend to full council that 1.119 million of grant and 1,996 million HRA match funding. I think that requires a decimal point, which I'm sure Councillor Whitehead would have pointed out when she introduced the report, which she's going to do now. Thank you.
Have I spoilt your fun, Steve?
Leave it in.
So this evening, Cabinet is being asked to, firstly, recommend to the full council that the 1.19 million of grant and 1.96 million HRA match funding is included in the HRA capital programme, and secondly, agree to receive a further report to approve the expenditure and the acquisition of 9 homes. In bringing this proposal to Cabinet, I want to be as clear but as detailed as possible. This is the first meeting for this proposal to be discussed. There will be plenty of time for further discussion later, but I feel it is very important to explain exactly what is being proposed now, as I am aware of a level of confusion relating to this proposal, and it is important to have both a financial and a moral context. The resettlement of refugees from both Ukraine and Afghanistan has, in many ways, lacked the central focus that good support required. Full funding needed to have been given to councils with statutory housing obligations to provide for refugees in a way that could provide reliable housing and support those who have experienced war and disruption, often, especially in the case of the resettlement schemes linked to Afghanistan, those who've provided support to British forces and need our support now. This lack of a foundational approach has proved difficult for many councils to manage, as it has resulted in complex homelessness cases and the use of accommodation that I would consider to be unsuitable to provide for individuals and families whilst they are under the care of the Home Office. The government recently announced details of a national £500 million scheme, which goes some way towards remedying this situation. The Local Authority Housing Support Fund has been created to enable local authorities to purchase properties in their area to accommodate both Ukrainian and Afghan refugee households for an initial period of 3 years. This funding allocation was offered to 182 local authorities in England by means of match funding. Thanet was one of these local authorities, and central government is funding 35 to 40% of the cost of providing 9 properties for this purpose. A memorandum of understanding was returned to the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, otherwise known as DLUC, excitingly, in March 2023, which registered the Council's interest in the scheme. In order to utilise the grant, it will be necessary to match fund the acquisitions with 1.96 million of additional borrowing within the HRA Capital Programme. The properties must be purchased by 30th of November 2023. Any properties acquired will form part of the Council's housing stock, with the income and expenditure managed within the housing revenue account. The homes can subsequently be used to accommodate households from the Council's housing waiting list. Providing a new and permanent supply of accommodation will also help to address local housing and homelessness pressures. As a council and as a community, we have a moral duty to do our best to house those who are most vulnerable. And we do well in discharging that duty, and will continue to do so. We have 3,470 properties within our housing portfolio, all general needs housing, all used by residents who have been on our housing list. What is proposed here, relating to the very specific requirements of a particular governmental fund, is the purchase of 9 homes, all of which will eventually become general needs housing for the current usage of refugees from both the Ukraine and Afghanistan, who have arrived here as part of the following government-led schemes: the Afghan Citizen Resettlement Scheme, including eligible British nationals under this scheme, the Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy, the Ukraine Family Scheme, Homes for Ukraine, and the Ukraine Extension Scheme. There are particular requirements for the homes to be acquired, and a very short timescale to acquire them in. At least 2 of the homes purchased are required to have 4 bedrooms. The remaining homes are required to be 2 or 3 bedroom homes. Discussions have taken place with the local housing developer to potentially purchase 6 3-bed units and 3 4-bed units to meet the above requirements. The units will be newly constructed with no refurbishments or adaptations needed. They are nearing completion and will be ready by the end of June 2023, which allows us to meet the requirements of the funding and the short timescale of November 2023. This mix of units meets the requirements of the grant, as at least 2 are 4-bedroom homes. There are, to my mind, 2 main issues to consider in relation to this item, and both are interlinked. Firstly, as human beings and as a council, we have a moral duty to do our best to support those in need and those who are vulnerable. This grant, partial though it is, supports us to fulfil that moral duty and provides specifically for individuals who are protected within our Equalities Act commitments. Secondly, the fund also supports the growth of our housing portfolio in general, which allows us to support all residents in the long term. I especially am keenly aware of the issues surrounding rent inflation in Thanet and the need for social housing, as evidenced over many years of council debates, and our ongoing and future build and acquisition plans reflect this general need. The addition of a further 42 new homes to our housing portfolio in our forward plan yesterday indicates our initial inroads into our ambitious social and affordable rent programme. However, provision for one, in this case, is provision for all, and is a significant contribution to our housing infrastructure. And it is important to consider the full scope of both the fund and our contribution to it, in both a moral and a financial sense. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Yates. I'll bring you Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. It is, of course, sensible that we take advantage of the government allocated 1.9 million towards purchasing 9 new homes. But TDC's HRA contribution of 1.96 million is a sum that would enable us to build 5 to 6 properties without this support. I would ask, therefore, how the Council will address issues where the Afghan or Ukrainian tenants are not ready to move on after the initial period of 3 years.
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Bayford. There have been a lot of questions from housing going to central government to ask for the specifics in relation to this fund, because it wasn't especially clear, to be honest. So the match funding that we have, as you noted, is 35 to 40%, which requires us, if we want to use it, to supplement it from our HRA. So it's significant to my mind that those properties do come back into the portfolio overall. However, there is nothing, to my knowledge, that specifies exactly what is to happen at the end of that point. It's important to note the scale of our housing portfolio overall, however, in that these are 9 properties from what will hopefully be several thousand properties by the end of that 3-year period. So we may be providing for a particular purpose at this point, but those are properties that will eventually come back into our portfolio. But I'm happy to pass over to Mr. Porter if we've had any further guidance from central government. Thank you.
Thank you. There isn't any specific guidance that we've seen that says exactly how that mechanism will work. The guidance attached to the funding says that they should be used for the purpose of Ukrainian and Afghan refugees for as long as they're required for that purpose, and then they would return to general needs housing stock for letting to people on the register. I think the key thing about the costs that I think is probably worth highlighting is that in all of our building programmes, we're building for affordable rent, and the council has an adopted policy for affordable rent, and the subsidy levels that we use to support those programmes, whether they're from grant from Homes England, or in this case grant from DLUC, or it could be our the use of our right to buy one-for-one receipts. All of those programmes subsidise the costs by around about 40%. And at 40% subsidy, generally we can build for affordable rent lettings and make those schemes cover their costs over the period of the business plan, and actually add value to the business plan. So in the long term, the more homes that we build at that kind of subsidy rate and at that rent level, the more we can build. So you know, it's adding every home adds value to the plan.
I think from my point of view, the council can't be in the position of turning down a grant of over £1 million towards social housing, and I think morally the council can't be in a position of turning away this offer because that it's directed at refugees, particularly from Afghanistan and Ukraine. It is unfortunate that it's come forward at the beginning of the new administration in relative isolation, because we would like to have seen it, been able to do it as part of an overall plan to increase our social housing stock. That's certainly our intention, and I understand people in the community saying, well, what about us? I think it's up to the council to answer that question, and certainly this administration intends to do exactly that. But this project stands alone. It has to be dealt with now. Clearly there was a contact with government before the election by the previous administration, an indication that they wish to support this scheme, and I think it's right that we go forward with it. But it's up to the council to, one, make a success of this, but also to demonstrate that it's going to provide more affordable housing for residents who currently live in the area. Members, anybody wish to say anything?
You just said it all.
I'll give you more opportunity in future, Councillor Alban. Okay. Do members agree? Okay, thank you. And it is 1.996 million, I believe. Right, item 9 is the vehicle replacement programme, and that is Councillor Alban.
Here I am. Okay. This report seeks Cabinet approval to start spending from the agreed 2.115 million of allocated budget for 23-24 on the purchase of 4 12-tonne replacement refuse vehicles that have reached the end of their useful life. These purchases have been considered in line with the Council's agreed net zero strategy, and although where possible and based on advances in technology, we have allowed for electric vehicles and the additional associated cost of these. Due to constraints around current infrastructure, vehicle range and requirements, it will not be possible to purchase these particular vehicles as diesel alternatives. As indicated, the vehicle replacement programme for this financial year does assume, where possible, that electric vehicles will be acquired. This will mean purchasing tried and tested vehicles that have proved to be fit for purpose. In this particular phase, this will predominantly be car-derived vans and other smaller vehicles up to 7.5 tonnes. A further more detailed report on this will be brought back to Cabinet in due course, and to support this, work is underway to establish the full extent of the infrastructure investment required to support the electrification of our fleet moving forwards. In accordance with section 13.03b of the Constitution, this report seeks approval of a key decision to spend against this agreed budget allocation for the purchase of replacement vehicles. And I move the recommendation in option 1 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Yates. And I have Councillor...
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Alban. At this time, I don't have a problem with purchasing diesel vehicles, but with regard to paragraph 2.3, I'm concerned that you state that electric versions will be purchased within the 23-24 replacement programme, because there's an ongoing debate as to how eco-friendly they really are. Volvo have released figures stating that gas emissions are 70% higher manufacturing an electric car rather than a petrol car. A huge amount of energy is required to make the lithium-ion battery, and they are extremely heavy, an imperfect device for an electric car, and concerns have been raised about them being used in trucks because of their weight and about the contents of the batteries, which are toxic and can contaminate the environment at the end of their life. Would it be safer to wait a while before, as there are better alternatives being developed? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. I don't know whether anyone wishes to comment on that. Do you want to say anything? Yeah, Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. I think it's made it plain within in the report that the electric vehicles that we look at, they've got to be fit for purpose, and I think that's the whole point. Otherwise, we would have gone straight in with electric vehicles. Certainly, in relation to the 12-tonne vehicles, it's only recently, I think about a month ago, that one company has now just started up with 12-tonne electric vehicles, which are actually waste vehicles, because the majority, otherwise all the 12-tonne vehicles are van-like for carrying goods, etc., and not waste trucks. So, and obviously the waste trucks need the power to lift whatever they've got to lift, and also to crush what they've got to crush. So the important part of that is for us to look to see that they are what we require and how we need it, and that will go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, I think the direction of travel is fairly clear, if you'll forgive the... Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Alban. I was going to ask, I suppose, a parallel question, which is, in view of the way that the technology is changing so fast, in view of the fact that new vehicles are being introduced all the time, and that I understand with regard to the waste vehicles, the main problem at the moment with moving to electric is to do with range. have we considered the possibility maybe of leasing diesel vehicles as a temporary measure while we see how the market develops?
Councillor Alban?
Yeah, I'll come back on that, Chair. Yeah, the issue is, as I just said, there is just one company started producing 12-ton vehicles a month ago. So we don't know the viability of them, we don't know how they're going to work, we don't know, there's lots of don't knows about this particular vehicle. So that's something we need to look at, and as well as that, we've got to sort out our charging abilities at Manston Road Depot, and also as well, what we don't want to get is caught out halfway round a round and the vehicles pack up because they're running out of charge because of the amount of energy that they've got to use up. So I think the way that this needs to be, we do need to purchase these vehicles rather than rent the vehicles or hire them. So that is the proposal, Chair.
Councillor Yates?
Yeah, it was just to add that the Climate Change Cabinet Advisory Group is likely to be discussing the vehicle replacement scheme in addition to the operational services. It might not be the first meeting, it might be the second meeting of the Climate Change CAG, so that we can provide that information about what are the timescales for the electric vehicle charging points at our depots. So I think Mike wants to chip in on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to add on the issue of lease versus purchase, where we haven't looked at it specifically in this instance, with your question about electric vehicles, but where we've looked at leasing before, it's roughly twice the cost of purchase over the whole life of the vehicle. I think if we were looking, and we know that purchasing an electric vehicle currently, they are roughly twice the capital cost of, for an electric vehicle versus a Euro 6 diesel engine vehicle. So I think leasing an electric vehicle would be quite a lot more for the whole life of the vehicle than purchase. Oh, sorry, Lisa. So I think, that same sort of principle applies. It's roughly twice the cost of capital purchase. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I think again, it's unfortunate that one of the first acts of the new administration is to buy more diesel vehicles, because that isn't where any of us want to be. And I think we may have disagreements about which technology we need to use going forward, but certainly we would have preferred not to be in this place. Obviously, this was another decision which couldn't be made before the election. I obviously wasn't available at the time. Do members agree? Thank you. Shall we move on to item 10, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund update from Councillor Duckworth?
Thank you, Chair. As outlined within the report, Thanet was allocated just over £1.1 million until March 2026 to deliver the proposals within the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. The report requests Cabinet to note the inclusion of the capital element into our capital programme and to authorise commencement of delivery. We understand that this funding programme is meant to be replacing European funds, which Thanet previously benefited from, and the funding allocation was via a formula. However, I am sure you will agree that it's likely that further funding will be required to ensure we are able to make a difference to our local communities. The report sets out the priorities for the funding and links directly back to the guidance set out by central government. As mentioned in the report, the budget will be reprofiled. Some of this will be informed by the mapping work that's being commissioned. I urge all councillors to attend the members' briefing next Tuesday, which will be online, where officers will present further information about the programme and what the next steps will be. We will also require your help to inform the voluntary, community and social enterprise mapping. Tell us who is in your ward and share the information that we send out. This is a technical recommendation requesting the ability to deliver the programme. I propose that Cabinet note the capital programme will need to be amended to include the capital element of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. approve the commencement of procurement activities that exceed £250,000 in order to deliver the UK Shared Prosperity Programme as outlined in Section 2, Thanet's UK Shared Prosperity Fund Programme. 3. The Head of Regeneration and Growth is authorised to agree appropriate contracts and spend in collaboration with the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Property in order to deliver the projects within the Council's processes and procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Yates. And Councillor Pugh, before I introduce you, I mean, let me congratulate you on your elevation to leadership of the Conservative group. I obviously wanted to do that at annual council, but you were unavoidably unable to join us. So we're pleased to see you here tonight, and look forward to hearing what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I'm not stuck on the M11 with a broken down car. Councillor Cupp came and picked me up tonight to avoid that problem. But no, thank you, Chair. I'd first like to wish Councillor Whitehead happy birthday, really. I can think of better places to spend all of our birthdays, but that doesn't mean that Councillor Whitehead wants to be here any less than we do. Pleasure. I'd first like to say that, you know, I take no credit as a former Cabinet member when this initial bid was put in some years ago. I very much welcome this. It's absolutely fantastic that we've secured this funding, but it's through no one else's hard work apart from officers and the Head of Regeneration, particularly with, you know, how extensive these bids need to be. I think as has been outlined within the report and as was within the initial bid, I think it's really important that we support people to gain new skills and new employment opportunities, particularly linking in with the creative sector in Margate and the wider area, and of course the marine, with everything that's happening with levelling up down at the Port of Ramsgate as well. So I really think that this is really encouraging, and it's certainly a good start, but more funding is needed. The only real question that I have is that, considering that the timescales are going to be shortened by a year, and I appreciate that's not our making, but because of the time that it's taken to be awarded this, I suppose I'm keen to understand what the risk is that we don't deliver all of this scheme in the time that's been allocated, and particularly I wouldn't want us to have to kind of hand any of that money back to central government. I think it's important that we either seek an extension. I suppose that's what I'm asking. Would we be able to seek an extension, or is it that we'll just go a little bit nuts to ensure there's no money left by the end of the deadline? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if Councillor Duckworth, do you wish to comment, or would you like to hand over to the Head of Regeneration and Growth?
I would like to hand over to the Head of
I thought you
Regeneration.
might.
Thank you. Yes, it was actually 6 months worth of funding, because the initial year was 6 months. The year one was 6 months, so it's only 6 months that's been rolled into year two. One of the other things that we did was argue for more funding to provide the administrative support within the local authority. So there was a cap of 4%, and we argued for 10 to include hiring an officer within the team rather than outsourcing that work. So we have a dedicated officer who will be delivering the programme, which means we are therefore able to kind of dedicate some proper time and resource to delivering the activity. By next week, we'll have a commission out to complete the mapping exercise, which will then help inform things like the grant programme, and we're working with other community organisations already to develop up some of those things so that we can hit the ground running, and we definitely anticipate spending the money within the required time and hopefully asking for some more.
Thanks for that. Members have any other comments? I've got a call in Councillor Austin, sorry. Nearly forgot you, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. Unthinkable, Chair. Thank you. I actually had 3 questions, and Councillor Duckworth has already answered one, which was about how ward councillors can help, and where we'll get more detail about this, which hopefully will be in the briefing. It's great to hear that our help will be welcomed on this, because we're very keen to get involved in it. The second question Councillor Pugh has asked, which was about risk and getting everything done in the timescale. My third question is about the skills element. As many of you know, I'm a skills person, and I'm very keen keen to see this prioritised. I'm a bit concerned that some of the skills stuff seems to be happening rather late, particularly the green skills bit, and I'm wondering if is that because we're not expecting that the levelling up work will be in a place where we can use it until then, or are there other reasons involved in that? Thank you.
That sounds like a question for Ms Askew to me.
Thanks. The skills element is at the back of the programme because that was how it was set out by central government. So they'd set out over the 3-year period when parts should be delivered. So when we submitted our investment plan, that's how we profiled it. Since we've been awarded the funding, I think that is changing, and government is now suggesting that you could do skills elements earlier, but obviously we'd spent a lot of time putting in the kind of profile on the basis of the information we had before us. So we are now reviewing how we will deliver that, and I think we're still waiting for some further guidance. The programme, the ambition of the programme was to be informed at the outset, to then use that information to deliver across the back end of the programme. And it's also the way the funding is profiled. So in year 3, there's a bigger amount of funding than there was in year 1 and year 2.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Members, any further comment on that one? Okay, I certainly welcome the fact that we're going to get a briefing on it, because I think we were discussing earlier that it's quite technical, the report, and quite opaque. So I think some explanation would be welcome for most members, including the leader. Okay, so Cabinet's asked to note the capital programme will need to be amended to include the capital element of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, approve the commencement of procurement activities that exceed 250,000 in order to deliver the UK Shared Prosperity Programme as outlined in Section 2, Thanet's UK Shared Prosperity Fund Programme, to agree that the Head of Regeneration and Growth is authorised to agree appropriate contracts and spend in collaboration with the Cabinet Member for Regeneration of Property in order to deliver the projects within the Council's processes and procedures. Do members agree? Agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 11, which is the procurement of a CCTV installations repair and preventative maintenance contract, which is Councillor Keane.
Thank you. Thanet District Council is committed to improving the community safety. Directly relating to this commitment is the Council's ability to reduce crime and the impact of criminality upon the district and address antisocial behaviour and related fly tipping complaints. CCTV is central to delivering this commitment, with 533 CCTV cameras across towns, housing stock and council-owned sites. The current CCTV contract for installation and planned and preventative maintenance, which was awarded under a Crown Commercial Service framework, is due to expire. The Council wishes to make use of Crown Commercial Service framework once again as the method for procure services for CCTV in relation to public space surveillance systems, along with housing CCTV and council building CCTV. The value of the contract under the duration of terms is £650,000. I would like to recommend that Cabinet exercises its powers and approves this recommendation for use of a Crown Commercial Service framework as the method to place a direct award to British Telecoms plc in relation to CCTV services, inclusive of installation and repairs maintenance for a minimum period of 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you. Members wish to discuss that one? Councillor Alban?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. It's just a question, really, and I think Mr. Geddes might be the person to answer that question. As some of us know, especially in Ramsgate, we've got the police gave money for CCTVs to be put up in such place, for instance, in Albion Gardens in Ramsgate. The actual mast that it's going to be sitting on has been there for nearly a year, and the CCTV hasn't been installed. So I'm just wondering, when they are finally installed, will that CCTV come through to our operation?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Alban. I won't go into all the gaudy details of the tales of woe of the Ramsgate CCTV camera installation. What I can do is give confirmation that 3 of the camera systems will be operational within the next 2 weeks. The remaining 2 will be fully operational within the next 2 months. All will terminate at the control room and all will have the ability to be monitored all day, every day, and will record 24/7.
Thank you. Just what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Yes, I can think of another Eastcliff councillor who will be very interested in that response. Okay, members, it's been moved and seconded. I'll read the recommendation again. That the use of the Crown Commercial Service Framework Lot 12 be agreed as the method to place a direct towards British Telecommunications plc in relation to CCTV services around public space, surveillance systems, housing stock CCTV and corporate asset CCTV, inclusive of installation and repairs and maintenance for a minimum period of 3 years. That's been moved and seconded. Do members agree? Agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 12, which is corporate performance Q4 2022-23, which is me. So the report in front of members sets out, as part of the Council's corporate performance process, 39 key performance indicators which are monitored to provide an indication of how the Council is performing. They don't look at every aspect of the Council services and the data the Council collects, but they do provide an overview of progress against the Council's key corporate priorities. Other data is collected and monitored at a service level. Performance management is a key part of the corporate governance process and adds value by helping to ensure accountability of the performance of the Council services against the corporate objectives. This helps to encourage enhanced accountability and continuous improvement. The data for most of the corporate indicators is now available to view on our website at any time. It's been agreed previously that a 6-monthly report of the Council's corporate performance will be shared with the Overview and Scrutiny Panel and the Cabinet to provide an opportunity to more closely review the direction of travel on our key service areas. This will allow sufficient time for actions and issues to be resolved between committee meetings, and as the data for the corporate performance indicators is on the website. The report presented this evening identifies the data as at the end of Q4, which is up to the end of March. The data captured is within a format which aims to provide the public with clear and easy access to information on how key services are performing. Detailed graphs are also included to give a wider view of the direction of travel for each indicator. This report has previously been to Overview and Scrutiny Panel on the 30th of May, so we thank them for their engagement and feedback. And I move that Cabinet note the report. Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second it for a change.
That's seconded by Councillor Alban. Members have any comments? Okay. Thanks very much. We will move on to item 13, which is the Tenant and Leaseholder Services KPI Q3 and Q4 Housing Performance Report. So very much the same thing from a housing perspective, which once again is Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you very much, Leader. This evening, Cabinet is asked to note and scrutinise the contents of the reports for quarters 3 and 4. Every quarter, Tenant and Leaseholder Services bring forward performance reports to Overview and Scrutiny and to Cabinet. This is a requirement of the Council's landlord compliance policies and allows the opportunity for early intervention should any performance issues arise. Tonight I have the pleasure of presenting the Quarter 3 and Quarter 4 report. I'm very pleased to be able to state that performance for 5 of the 6 landlord health and safety compliance work streams remains steady at 100%. These work streams operate as business as usual, and the teams work to complete outstanding actions within set timeframes. Compliance for domestic electrical safety certificates has remained at around 90% for most of this financial year. The service has ensured that certificates are renewed at the end of their 5-year cycle, but has struggled to completely clear the backlog of certification works. Access to properties has been an issue and a cause of delays in certification, and processes are now in place to ensure that certifications can be completed. Additional resources and stronger contract management have been deployed to address the backlog, and the position is starting to improve during quarters 3 and quarters 4. Operational performance has seen some success, and there are areas that are being actively improved. Quarter 3 always reflects the increased demand we see during the winter months, with the concurrent and usual trend of a fall in performance for partnering contractors and their customer satisfaction due to increased pressures. Both contractors recovered in Q4, with Mears finishing the year with 90.3% customer satisfaction. The contract with Gascall, the partnering contractor for gas appliance repairs and gas compliance programme, came to an end on the 31st of the 3rd, 23. A new contractor was successful in the recent procurement exercise, and BSW started as our new gas contractor on 1st of the 4th, 23. The capital budget spend has been disappointing this year due to key contractors going into administration. Housing never exists in isolation, and the ongoing challenges of external financial pressures are felt across the service, but especially within our external systems. The team are procuring replacement contracts which are set to be in place this financial year, which will improve the capital budget spend position. There's been significant success in improving void turnaround performance and also in reducing arrears. This is a huge success for the team, who have steadily reduced arrears despite a very difficult operating environment. Arrears are 2% lower now than when the service transitioned from East Kent Housing in October 2020, which indicates outstanding support for residents and performance from the team, considering the significant financial and cost of living challenges that have marked the last year. I move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Yates. And last up is Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I'd also like to thank Sally for her clear and transparent reports, as always. I'm pleased that the forced entry procedure has been successfully implemented where electrical certificates are concerned. I'll ask whether this is applied to other services such as fire safety, as the inability to access properties seems to be delaying progress and incurring costs in ensuring the safety of our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Obviously, we already have that in place in relation to gas. We now have it in place in relation to electric. In terms of the specifics of our fire safety, I'm happy to pass over to Ms O'Sullivan.
Thank you. So for other compliance matters where health and safety is involved, we can use a forced access process where other properties and other residents are affected by the non-compliance of a single resident. So for example, in a block of flats, if we have a tank which is only accessible through, a water tank accessible through one particular resident's home, but it affects all the residents in that block of flats, then we can force access there. If another example is where that was a house and it only affected that resident, we couldn't force access in that situation. And that's true across all compliance work streams.
Thank you for that. Members, do you note the contents of the report? No. That's agreed, thank you. That concludes the business for tonight's meeting. I declare the meeting closed at, I make it 7:57. I'll defer to Charles if he disagrees. The live stream of the meeting will now end. Thank you very much to all these officers who've attended, given up their evening this evening, and to members who've joined us as well. And enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
It's not all going to be 13 items, I don't think.
No.
That was particularly long.
No, it was, but I mean.